Joining me now is Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He sits on the Judiciary Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Katie.
I'm sure you saw this. James Clapper on Meet the Press the other day said that he hasn't seen any evidence, hard evidence of any collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, at least up until January 20th. You've said that you haven't seen any hard evidence. Without anyone having seen this hard evidence, should there still be an investigation?
Well, I think, Katie, this is a critical investigation for the defense of our democracy, and I'm encouraged that the Senate Intelligence Committee members have this week begun to get access to the intercepts, the transcripts that are out at Langley at CIA headquarters that will begin to provide some insight into whether there is a fire here. There's a lot of smoke. There's a lot of concerning allegations of or evidence of some ties between the Trump campaign team and Russia, but there's no hard evidence or proof yet. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And in order for us to get to the bottom of this, Katie, in order for us to resolve this cloud that's hanging over the Trump administration, I think it is important that it be fully, fairly, and promptly investigated. And if there's no proof, that we move on. And if there is proof, that we move forward with taking the next step.
Senator, isn't that the same argument that you're making against and Democrats are making against Donald Trump when he comes out and he says that President Obama was wiretapping me and then not offering any evidence? Without any evidence, should there be an investigation?
Well, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that's very disconcerting. So, for example, when the Access Hollywood tape came out late this summer in the course of the campaign, it was one of the most devastating developments in the entire campaign against Donald Trump. It was within a matter of hours, I believe, that the John Podesta email dump happened through WikiLeaks. Very disconcerting timing. There's other things that have happened, such as the National Security Advisor being forced to resign, frankly being fired, for lying about his contacts with the Russian ambassador to the vice president. Just today, there was even more alarming developments about the National Security Advisor not having been truthful about being a foreign agent on behalf of Turkey. He made a filing today to the Justice Department that he had done $500,000 worth of lobbying on behalf of Turkey. There's other complicating relationships and meetings between senior Trump campaign officials and Russian officials that I think deserve to be investigated, because there is indisputable proof, a conclusion by the intelligence community, that Russia was trying to interfere in our election and that Russia had concluded that Trump was their preferred winner in our presidential election. There is no comparable circumstantial evidence, Katie, to provide any sort of buttress for President Trump's Saturday morning tweet. Let me also just remind you how unusual, how bizarre it is to have the sitting president of the United States make such a remarkable claim that his predecessor had him wiretapped, not in a press conference, not in public, not in the light of day, not with any significant evidence suggesting circumstantial evidence, as I just did about the alternative claims, but to do it by a tweet early in the morning on a Saturday.
And I will say this. My colleague Hallie Jackson asked the White House just the other day if Donald Trump has the evidence, since he said so definitively, why would he not pass that evidence along to Congress instead of asking them to investigate, to find the evidence? The White House, their answer to that was they didn't want to violate any separations of powers. But moving on, though, if it turns out, you say there's a lot of smoke here, and you say there are a lot of unanswered questions, and it is inarguable that the Trump campaign and Trump administration hasn't been entirely clear about conversations that folks have had with the Russian ambassador, and there are all sorts of other questions out there. But if it turns out there is nothing there, that there is no there as they suggest, do the Democrats, are they concerned about losing their credibility on this issue and losing their credibility with the American public and only seeming like they are battling Trump just for the sake of battling Trump?
Well, Katie, that depends on what course of action we take. I'll remind you that Republicans in the House held not one, not two, not three, but more than a dozen hearings about Benghazi over several years. They refused to let it go, even when it was clear that they'd investigated it absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt, as thoroughly as was humanly possible. If we're still doing investigations into allegations of some tie between the Trump campaign and Russia 3 or 4 years from now, with not a shred of compelling evidence, I do think the American people would get tired of it and would say that we were simply doing it for partisan ends. I'll remind you, Donald Trump hasn't even been president 2 months at this point, and the shocking allegations that led to his attorney general recusing himself and the national security advisor being fired happened just a matter of days ago, and the Senate Intelligence Committee has just gotten access to the underlying intelligence this week.
Senator, you told WHHY radio that Democrats don't want to shut down the government, but they might if they have to. So what circumstances would Democrats consider shutting down the government for? Would it be to save Obamacare? Would it be to force an outside investigation into Russia? Would it be to prevent the confirmation of Neil Gorsuch?
Well, Katie, let's just put that back into some context. On that interview, I was being pressed for, do you have any leverage at all, given that Democrats are in the minority in both the House and the Senate? The interviewer was saying, well, how can you possibly stop the repeal of the Affordable Care Act? How can you possibly compel an investigation if Republicans refuse to cooperate and you become more convinced that there's evidence that justifies really pushing it to the outer limit? And recognizing that at the end of the day, the leverage that was used by Republicans in the previous administration was to compel shutting down the government. I simply recognize that that's a tool that's been used over a number of years in order to force some resolution. I don't support shutting down the government, Katie. I think it's a very reckless, even destructive thing to do. That the government was shut down for 17 days, I think in 2013, in a misguided attempt at using that leverage to repeal the Affordable Care Act, I think caused some real damage to our reputation around the world and to the effectiveness of our government here at home. Democrats are the party that want government to work. So I think it is a very remote possibility that we would do that. But it was in the course of an interview where I was being pressed about, do you have any tools at all in the minority, that I made that point. It is an extreme tool that's been recently used by the other party, and that I really, truly hope we don't consider using or get compelled to use at some point here in the near future.
Senator Chris Coons, the Democrat from Delaware, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.